Back to Ghost. All the way across forecheck. In front. They score! Patrick tips it home. It's a 4-3 hockey game as the kid seems to be enjoying it on the top power play unit. 3-point game for Patrick.
SportsNetwork.com and Wildfire Radio present the O&B Puckcast, episode number 55. I'm your host, Isaiah, as we are here with a Flyers training camp preview. And my buddy, Chef B, will probably not be able to make it tonight. He's busy at Steam Pub in Southampton, PA, but we are here joined by Brotherly Puck, Brotherly Pod, National Puck, National Pod, the busiest man in hockey podcasting, Dan the Flyer fan.
That's right. I am here and have the itch to watch some Flyers hockey again.
Yep, it's getting there. So joining us to fill in the void is an old friend from PhilliesFlyer.com and his own podcast, Flyers Face Off, Kevin Fortier. How you doing, man?
Hey, I am doing fantastic. It is a real pleasure to be back on the show.
Ah, terrific, terrific. And we're in that little in-between time, gents, where there's a lot of little things starting to happen. Some seeds are starting to be planted. There are some signings. We're going to talk about that. But let's get the listeners squared away about what the Flyers schedule is right now. Let's go right up front so there's no mystery. You don't have to go searching through different articles or internet links. So the Flyers rookie camp started on Saturday and it continued Sunday. We're going to talk about some of the impressions with that. They were off today and they come back for a skate tomorrow. And then they play the rookie game on Wednesday after an 11 a.m. skate, and they're at the PPL Center versus the New York Islanders. And then the big boys show up. Training camp begins, what is that, the 13th, the actual day that they report?
Yeah, I think so.
Yep, 13th.
Yeah, and they play their first exhibition game on 16th versus the Islanders at home. Then they go to the island, I believe, or in Brooklyn. I'm not sure exactly where it is exactly. The next night, it's probably one of those split squad situations. And they play two more games that week. The next week they play again at Boston, and then on the 23rd. Then the 26th they play against the Rangers, and then they play a exhibition game over in Lausanne, Switzerland, before starting the season in, what is it, Dan, the Czech Republic versus the Chicago Blackhawks.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's October 4th, I think. So we're less than a month away from Flyers hockey for real. But in the interim, on the 16th, we're going to have some exhibition hockey, and being a home game, I would imagine that'll be available, at least streamed. And Kevin or Dan, do you have any info whether there's going to be streaming for the rookie game on Wednesday?
They typically do. I remember the stream last year wasn't the greatest, but I did end up finding a streaming site. I believe it's something like onhockey.com or something like that. I can post a link later that was pretty reliable for, like anything that wasn't being televised.
Right. And, people want to notice a little information. Check the O&B Puckcast account at O&B Puck, and we'll certainly be posting or at least retweeting any links with regard to that. People are dying to watch hockey. I know the football season just started yesterday, and yet you have the yearning for hockey. And we're going to get back to rookie camp and some of the impressions that have been out there. But I guess the big news, Dan, I'm going to start with you. Zach Werenski and RFA, one of that big trio with Ivan Provorov from the Flyers and Charlie McAvoy from the Bruins. Well, he signs today an interesting deal. It's a bridge deal for 3 years, $15 million, average annual value of $5 million per. But the way it's structured is $4 million, $4 million, and $7 million. So if I understand correctly, Dan, that would mean the qualifying offer that in his last year, which would be an arbitration year before unrestricted free agency, would be for $7.7 million. So it's kind of like there was some compromise here on both sides.
Yeah, there was definitely some movement to happen there to get that bridge deal on a relatively low cap. Not entirely sure what this means for Ivan Provorov. I've always the rhetoric is that they're waiting for the dominoes to fall. One's going to sign, then the other's going to sign. But man, I really hope this does not bode well for Provorov. I really don't want another bridge deal, especially for another defenseman. You already did that with Travis Sanheim, and given the tricky cap scenario that the Flyers are going to face over the next 4 years here, with Carter Hart and Sanheim in 2021, plus the expansion draft, and the year after you have Hart and Giroux and Couturier, plus Patrick and Myers and Lindblom in between. There's a lot of bodies that are going to need contracts here, and I think trying to get Provorov locked up on long term on as decent cap as possible should be the key for him.
Yeah, I don't know if I necessarily agree with Provorov coming off a bad year. So I definitely see the point. And with this agent, Kevin, Mark Gandler, who's known as the Drew Rosenhaus of the NHL by some in some quarters, we might have to wait until Charlie McAvoy signs his deal. And in my opinion, McAvoy is the best of the trio.
Yeah, I agree. And I want to throw something out here just real quick before I forget it. One of the two Islanders games, one of the two Boston games, and the Rangers game are either being televised or being replayed on NHL Network. So if people are hoping to see some Flyers preseason games, it looks like 3 of the games are going to be either live or on replay. So just throwing that out there.
Excellent. Thanks for the info.
Yeah. I think I agree. McAvoy is the best of the 3. I was pleased to see the numbers on the Werenski deal because everything that we've been hearing has been so just ridiculously high for guys that are barely 22 years old. People are throwing out $8, $9, $10 million annual asset values, and it's just crazy. So seeing him sign a bridge deal, for 3 years, $5 million, certainly made me feel a little bit better that maybe some sanity was coming back into the discussions. Obviously, I think Werenski and Provorov are like really neck and neck. Werenski's a little better offensively, Provy's a little better defensively. I think all around McAvoy's probably got the highest ceiling. Yeah. So really, if they can, there's pros and cons, right? I mean, if he signs 3 years, then he's going to be arbitration eligible, and he'll have 1 year left on before going into UFA status. If they could lock him up, at 6.5 or 7, maybe even 7.5, but if they start getting up to $8 million and beyond, I'd rather see him do a bridge deal, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of where I'm at right now because let me give you a little update. I was listening to Russ Cohen, who has a source. I think I know who he is. He didn't mention him, so I'm not going to throw it out there. But Provorov's camp has already made some rumblings with regard to this signing, feedback-wise, saying that, well, Provorov isn't a one defenseman. Werenski's kind of, Seth Jones' caddy, like a number 2 guy. And to that I would say, yeah, you have a point. He plays more hard minutes. But Provorov is coming off a bad year. So to me, that mitigates that advantage and kind of stymies that argument. I mean, he had a really bad year last year. He struggled. I know he played hard minutes, but, be reasonable. This is all posturing by the agent. So I think McAvoy, if he signs burst, and it puts the bracket on what Provorov can ask for, because Werenski right now is playing as well, if not better than Provorov, and McAvoy's better than both. So we'll see how it turns out. Either way, I think it's a positive development. Dan, Jake Gardner is signed by Carolina, and there's a domino effect here. Now, he signed for, 4-point-something million, and a lot of it, people are saying, oh, how good he is, and listen, his back is definitely an issue. This is a guy who's on the street about a week before camp is ready to open, so I know he had offers, and he could have maybe had more money for a shorter term, but he obviously wants the security of getting the 4 years so he can stay in the league if he has some long-term back issues.
Yeah, it was an interesting contract. I guess the injury probably has kept him, from signing a contract for this long, but it was a little over $4 million, a 4.05. So 4 years with Carolina. It was a good move. A little interesting considering they traded DeHaan away earlier, but I guess they got assets back for that. So interesting move. Definitely helps their blue line, which is already looking pretty strong. Going to be interesting to see if there's any repercussions there. I know rumors of Justin Falk being traded because they have Jake Bean in the system here that looks like he can probably step into the NHL already now. So going to be interesting to see if there's any repercussions. But overall, a good signing for the Carolina Hurricane.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, he needs to be protected. He doesn't play very well in his own zone, but his puck retrieval was pretty good. And of course, once he's on the positive side of the puck, he's somewhat similar or comparable to Shane Gostisbehere. He doesn't have some of the dynamism that Gostisbehere does. He might probably a better straight line skater. Other than that, I think Gostisbehere is a better player. We saw those comparisons online on Twitter and other social media outlets. But yeah, there are rumors, and I don't want to take any steam away from Anthony DeMarco coming on later from the fourthperiod.com, giving updates from the rumor mill because it's starting to churn. But Kevin, it looks like Falk is going to be headed out of town. Now, there's rumors that Anaheim wants the player, but Anaheim is on Falk's no trade list. So they're trying to work out a deal, and apparently if they can get a long-term deal, Falk will be okay with that. And he'll let, and there's rumors, I don't know exactly who's involved. I've heard Andre Cachet could be one of the guys. Justin Falk right now is making 4.833, and he's going to be a UFA next year. So, Kevin, what say you if DeHaan is gone, and now you're bringing in Gardner. DeHaan's more of a hard minute guy, and you're bringing in Gardner, and now Justin Falk is more of a lighter minute guy, even though he's a leader and all that. So what's the mix look like, and what do you think this last minute shuffling by Carolina augurs for them?
Well, I said that I thought Carolina was going to really push for leadership role in the Metropolitan Division. One of the question was, they lost DeHaan on D, but he's injured a lot. I think the biggest question for them is in net, right? I mean, I think they're fine even with losing Justin Williams for at least part of the season. Their forward depth is going to be fine. They brought in Hala and Dzingel. On D, they're bringing in Gardner, another smooth skater. That's one of the things they've really got going for them on the back end is their skating ability. So, that leaves Justin Falk as probably the odd man out, 27-year-old righty with 1 year left. But they've got Hamilton and Pesce, who are both righties, and then Trevor Van Riemsdyk, potentially, the third pair on the right side. So, I think they're going to be fine. I mean, obviously, Jacob Slavin is, their best overall defenseman and
right.
Probably top 10 in, or at least close to top 10 among defensemen in the league. So one thing that I did hear that could be interesting is, who's really desperate for a defenseman is Winnipeg. They lost Trouba, Myers, and Sherratt. Is that his name?
Ben Sherratt, yeah. Sherratt of Fire, yes.
Yeah, with Patrick Laine still unsigned. I've heard some rumblings that potentially Carolina could be interested in talks with Winnipeg about Patrick Laine. He would certainly give them a superstar goal scorer. They've got some extra guys on D. Like you said, Jake Bean is still there. Hayden Fleury is there also, who could step up. So that might be kind of interesting if Carolina and Winnipeg were to pull off some sort of a deal there. Now, obviously, it'd have to be more than just Justin Falk in that deal for Laine, but who knows?
Yeah, I don't want to go too deep in the woods with that. There is some information I've heard today out of Winnipeg about the possibility of Laine moving. I don't know if Carolina's the place. I don't think they want to pay him. So that's a problem with Dundon. It's a unique ownership situation, and I'm not as sanguine on the Canes because where's the leadership? Whatever you want to say about Justin Falk, he was an alternate captain. They lose Justin Williams, apparently. Maybe he's a mid-season ad, but from what I'm hearing, I'm doubting that maybe. And then if their goaltending goes south, or Reimer, who sometimes looks like he can't stop a beach ball, Dan, I don't know if... I like a lot of the young talent. I'm not, I don't want to make this a podcast about Carolina, but they are an important rival in the Metro Division.
Yeah, they're going to fall into the group in the Metro Division that we really don't know what to make of just yet. There's a lot of talent here, especially in the back end. Their forward group is lacking a little bit. Their goaltending is definitely suspect with Mrazek and Reimer because you never know what kind of Peter Mrazek you're going to get. But, overall, they're one of the teams in the Metro, much kind of like the Devils and the Rangers, that we really don't know what they're going to be this season. If things work out and they're strong and Brenda Moore, has those guys in shape and the defense works out, they may be just fine again and maybe a competitive team throughout the season. But it's going to be definitely interesting to see what their potential is as we get closer to the season and throughout the year.
Yeah. It will be intriguing to see if they pull some last-minute moves. And, of course, I'm always waiting for Columbus to do something last minute because they certainly have the cap space. But don't sleep on Emil Bemstrom, the Finnish star for the Blue Jackets. He should be a very, very good player, natural scorer. But, hey, listen, gents, we got to talk about the Flyers and the...
Who?
Yes, the Philadelphia Flyers. This is the O&B, the Orange and Black Puckcast. But we got a little lost there in the weeds. But we wanted to give you the information. And, of course, like I said earlier, there's some implications here for the Flyers. We'll get into some of the other heavy rumor stuff through TFP a little bit later. But, okay, so the Flyers rookies show up. And shock of shocks, Kevin, the most impressive players really have been Morgan Frost, Isaac Ratcliffe, Joel Farabee, German Rupsov. What's that?
And Phil Myers.
And Phil Myers. And Phil Myers is playing the role of Oscar Lindblom last year. He's the guy who doesn't really belong here, but he's technically a rookie.
Yeah. He looked solid when he came up. He got a little tired towards the end of the season, I think. But then he looked good when he got brought up to play for Team Canada. He played on the third pair the first game there, and then whoever he was covering for that was out injured came back. But then he actually played his way back into that third pairing role the last couple of games. In the gold, the semis, and then in the gold medal game, and he looked solid. He was out there end of the game. He was out there on key penalty kills, and from what Bill Meltzer has said about the first couple of days, he's definitely stood out. His skating looks phenomenal. He said one of the things he needed to work on was to just try to stay a little bit more calm, try not to try to do too much, let the game kind of come to him. And like you said, he's kind of an elder statesman out there, And I'm really looking forward to seeing him going up against the Islanders rookies on Wednesday. And nothing is a lock, but from everything you've read, from what people, the management and coaches have, been saying, that they certainly expect that he's going to be in that third pairing right hand side on defense, and I'm just really looking forward to it. And from the forwards perspective, that line that they've had together, it seems, for the first couple of days of camp with Farabee, Ratcliffe, and Frost has been phenomenal, and it should be fun to watch on Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, those guys, you want them to stand out. They're your best. They're your best players. And I think Rubtsov's kind of like a below the radar guy, and everything pretty much depends on his health. But Dan, there's other compelling stories, because when you think of Phil Myers and you think of a defenseman that we picked up, last year, Igor Zamula, they're undrafted, and they end up, coming to a camp as an invite. And we signed two of these guys recently, and there's some other guys this year, like Sean Comrie, a defenseman from the WHL, Josh Couturier, another defenseman, no relation to Sean.
Wyatt Wiley.
Well, Wyatt Wiley is actually, he's one of our draftees. These are kids that like Myers and Zamula.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, another guy's Mika Sear, a forward from the Q. And, there's a couple guys like this. And I'm looking through a list. I'm actually, another one would be Maxime Galad, who's a winger from the OHL. Yeah, so there's a bunch of these guys. And one of the guys who's hurt, who actually got a chance, he was a holdover from the development camp, Ben McCartney. And it's a shame, because he will not be able to play. I think he has a hip flexor or something like that. But Dan, the Flyers have been able to mine a little gold with some of these guys, and it makes up for some of these whiffs on, players like Pascal Laberge or some of these other players that haven't worked out.
Shusko.
Yeah, they've been able to strike some gold here and there. Quite frankly, I'm not familiar with most of these names this year, so I don't know what they hold. But, it definitely can't hurt to find, a diamond in the rough like this. Somebody that was undrafted and can come into your system and make a change. Phil Myers was a big one of them. Zumala could be one in a couple of years' time. So maybe they'll find another one this year, but maybe not. But always good to see them trying to find players from different, areas rather than just through the draft.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll see how these guys look. A couple other players that are flashing so far, here and there, of course. Igor Serdyuk was this year's draft, a 6th-round pick. And Mason Millman, a lot of people were very high. They thought on him, people thought the Flyers were high when they drafted him in the 4th round. But he's a guy really, Kevin, he closed toward the end of the season and really picked up his game. And when you're 18 years old, he was younger than most of the draftees. He was a younger draftee. A lot of times you can make tremendous progress over a very, very short period of time.
Yeah, I don't know a ton about him. I read about him, during the draft, but I have seen some Meltzer or somebody writing that he's looked decent at camp. Hopefully he'll play well and continue to progress, and maybe in a couple of years he'll be looking to join the Phantoms. I'm looking forward to seeing what Zamula does again. I actually watched some of his games in the CHL this past season. That kid's a great skater. He's obviously kind of small. I think he's 6'4", 165 right now.
Yeah, he's got to put weight on.
Yeah, he's got to put some weight on, but he's a great skater, and he's got good offensive instincts. He put up almost a point per game, if I remember right. So, we'll see what comes out of it, how it shakes out with some of the tryouts and, some of the other guys. Rubtsov is actually one of my guys that I think has a decent chance of making the Flyers if he stays healthy, like you said. Maybe playing on that third right wing or on the 4th line. Him or maybe O&B and maybe the 3 young studs there, Frost, Farabee, and Ratcliffe, start off and play for a while in the AHL, and then on injury call up or something maybe come up. But Rubtsov's got solid 200-foot game. he could play center or wing. So we'll kind of see how things shake out as they go through the end of the rookie camp part of it, and the game Wednesday, and then when everybody's on board and they start having preseason games.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dan, the thing about German Rusov, unlike Frost and Farabee, he's fully developed. He's 6 foot. He's like 205 or something like that. He's solid. He's ready to go. I mean, it's just if he can keep his head on a swivel, he's got a two-way game. He understands he's got to be more assertive offensively. And I'm thinking, listen, just this guy's has the profile of the kind of player they want in that third line wing. I know it's sexy to want Frost and Farabee, but I'm in no hurry to rush these guys because the same rule still applies to them too. Halfway through the season, one or both of these guys could be eligible to see some time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm in no hurry to get Frost, Farabee, or Ratcliffe up on the Flyers. There's just no reason for it at this point. Let them have some time in the Phantoms. Even if it's just a couple months to get their feet wet and they get adjusted and they look like stars, bring them up in February. That's fine. But for the time being, let them go. That third line right wing spot's going to be interesting. I like Rubtsov. I got to watch him a couple times with the Phantoms last year, but I think injuries are going to be his concern. I believe he played 14 games last year, whatever it was. So I don't know where he ends up slotting in. He maybe start the season. Quite frankly, I would go with Abe Kubel on the third line right wing. I think he impressed with the Phantoms and during his call up last year, and it can't hurt to give him a couple chances rather to see some ice time and see what he can do at this level and finally get a chance to legitimately prove himself.
Yeah, my only thing about Obed Kubel is I just don't think he's a third-line level player. I think that, in a situation... Now, we know Tyler Pitlick, who was actually Bill Meltzer's prediction, who would be the third-line right winger. Somebody's enjoying a beverage of their choice. I hope it's, it's spiked, like the punch. But, Tyler Pitlick hurt his wrist, which I think he had a problem with before. So, maybe he's back in time for camp, but I think Obed Kubel is more of a fourth-line player in the NHL. We'll see. I wouldn't mind. We'll probably see him. My actual favorite, I should say, if I can spit it out, would be Scott Lawton for third-line right wing and somebody else play center. So who would that be? Would Misha Vorobiev give another crack at that or another kick at that can, or would that be the spot for Rubtsov? We'll see. It'll be intriguing during the exhibition games and camp to see where the Flyers go with that. But gents, Kevin, just a couple previews from NHL.com. It was interesting watching Dan Rosen spar with E.J. Raddick. And, if you've listened to our show before, I think the consensus for us, except Anthony DeMarco, is that the Flyers are on the bubble. And we predicted that the Flyers are probably going to have to make a trade to get into the playoffs, because there's so many ifs and so many questions about the team that it's they're probably going to need another move. Whether the goaltending doesn't shake out, they need a scorer. The penalty killing is still not good enough. If Niskanen and Braun are slotted a spot higher than they really are capable of at this juncture, one of those things is not going to go right. But E.J. Raddick is very bullish on the Flyers, as is Matt Larkin from the Hockey News, who thinks that they're going to finish in third place. If you've seen the Hockey News yearbook, you'll see that. So, taking all that in, where do you stand?
Well, when I had on my show, I had Dan Silver on, and oh my God, I'm drawing a complete Ted, the chart guy. And when we went through, I picked the Flyers to come in third. And I think it's certainly, everybody on the Flyers underperformed last year. Basically, with the exception of Couturier, to a person, they were underperforming throughout big chunks of the season. I don't see any reason why, assuming Provy signs, he and Ghost don't have significant bounce backs this year. And Ghost has kind of been every other season, and he puts up stellar numbers. I certainly think that Niskanen should help on the settle down and reinforce the blue line. Hopefully with Patrick on the third line, and if it's Lindblom on the left, and then whoever ends up being on the right, with Hayes having been coming in at the number 2C role, I think the forwards should be pretty solid. You've gotten rid of the garbage on the fourth line. They should at least have a pretty decent fourth line out there. I think they should, without even blinking too hard, be able to have at least 10, 15 more points than what they put up last season. You've got Carter Hart, who should at least be decent. You're not going to have 8 different goaltenders, in net for the Flyers this season. I think they should compete. I think they should be close. I would say at least 3 to 4, barring some disastrous, thing happening. Like these guys just don't bounce back, or somebody gets injured. A key guy gets injured early on.
Yeah, the issue I have is I think along the continuum of last year's team, which was down 2-0 in 32 out of 82 contests, with 8 goaltenders, quitting on 2 coaches. If that's the nadir, right, the lowest point, and then you have what they did the prior year, 98, where I think 98 points, where I think they overperformed in a lot of ways, with a lesser roster. Even if you divide the difference, you're still at 90 points, and you hope that the improvements in between are going to mean 7-8 points to make up that gap. That's not the most statistically viable model I'm laying out, Dan, but that's why I think the Flyers are a bubble team. In that calculation is just a subjective thought that so much has to go right.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think the Flyers are a bubble team, and they made improvements which are going to make the team better, but I don't think they're going to push them significantly further ahead in the standings. And again, quite frankly, the Metro Division is very strong and kind of unknown, but can be strong. There can be pretty much every single team can be competitive this year. Maybe the Blue Jackets, maybe not, but overall, we don't really know where a lot of these guys land. You look over in the Atlantic Division, you obviously got Tampa, Boston, and Toronto locked in as the top 3, and if Florida and Montreal can get it together, maybe even Buffalo, they can help fight for the wild card as well. So I think the Flyers need to get a top 3 spot if they want to make the playoffs this year and really kind of fight for it, because it's going to be a tough season, and if the Flyers stumble at any point, they could get run over here.
They could.
Oh, one of my main.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was just real quick. One of my main points that I had in my notes here that I forgot to even mention was, with the new coaching staff, right? Elaine Vigneault coming in, they're going to have more of an up-tempo attacking style, game. Hopefully, there'll be more of an attack format on the penalty kill. I think the penalty kill should definitely be better. I mean, they were 80+% in the second half of the season last year.
Right.
I think if nothing else, they're going to come in and they're going to want to play well for the new coaching staff, and that should help as well.
I could see that, but I also see the potential for volatility there. You got a guy like Michel Therrien, Mike Yeo, and these guys are kind of. It's a strange mix of coaches. Even though there's a lot of talent there, I'm not sold that mix is necessarily the best. And maybe that's why they kept Lappy around as a liaison, because especially Therrien could get really, really abrasive. And
I think it's a mix that's going to either work really well or it's going to be a disaster. And I don't think there's going to be much of an in-between.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's feast or famine. And I think there's going to be a weeding out process. And in that weeding out process of trying to establish a new culture, which this team desperately needs, when you're quitting that much like they did last year, something is wrong, which is why I was upset they didn't clear more veterans out of here, in the off season. But that aside, there's going to be a weeding out process. Like, this is the new Flyers way. And I'm just wondering how much that's going to take its toll on certain guys, which is another reason why I think the Flyers got to make a trade. So, that could be yet another reason why there's leaks in the ship, and we'll just have to see how it goes. But, moving along, Dan, one of the things that we have to remember we all have our favorites. I mean, it seems like so many people, it's got to be Frost Farabee or at least Rubtsov. I got to see a new guy, We don't want to see Tyler Pitlick in anything more than a fourth line role. Don't tell me about Andy Andrioff and all that. But, Meltzer makes a good point in one of his articles, I think about 10 days ago, where he talks about don't get thrown by what you see in training camp. I mean, didn't we learn that with Vorobiev last year, And, even Claude Giroux, when he came in, didn't do that well. And other players have done better to begin with, like Vorobiev, like I was just saying. It doesn't have anything to do with how things are going to turn out long term. And we got to, it's exhibition games. Some guys are never, ever going to be seen again. They're going to go back to juniors and end up retiring. You got to have some perspective, even if we see some nice highlights on your Twitter feed.
Yeah, I've never been one to put a lot of stock in the rookie camps and preseasons and some fourth line AHLer it has a good camp and it's, oh man, he's gonna be a star. I try not to put too much weight in that, but I think at this point right now the players to watch would be Frost, Farabee, and Ratcliffe. Maybe guys like Aube Kubel and Rubtsov as well, see what they can do. But overall, I don't know what the bottom six's roster is going to look like. I don't know who's going to take that third line role, whether it's one of the kids. But quite frankly, I think again, Frost, Farabee, and Ratcliffe, I would leave them in the AHL, let them play as a trio for 20 minutes a night rather than 5 minutes on the fourth line in the NHL level. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens here, but it's important not to put too much weight in any one performance.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, can you really blame us, though? The Flyers system was ranked, I think it was number 7 by Corey Pronman. We've been waiting for these guys forever, so I'm not going to try and put down the fan base for getting all excited about some of these guys. It's just that we have to have some perspective.
No, absolutely. And I'm with you guys. I would say start the 3 forward studs in the AHL. I think you can certainly start the season, like I said before, with either Ruby or Knack on that third line wing. I mean, what I really do not just absolutely do not want to see is, and Meltzer was saying, I posted something with this yesterday and again today. He had up there that the brass was looking at one of Andrioff or Stewart or Gabriel or one of these guys to push for that third line right wing slot. And I'm like, hell no, God no. For the love of God, would you just stop with the veteran presence crap already?
Well, you don't like the Angel Gabriel? The Devil Gabriel, ex-Devil Gabriel.
No. I mean, geez, I'm so tired of that crap. I would say just have Pitlick as the 13th, forward. For once, put a Rubtsov and an Aube Kubel in there and see what they can do. Give a younger, faster guy, a chance to play. And Jasper, be quiet. Just see what happens, right? I mean, look what St. Louis did. St. Louis started with an all-rookie fourth line last year. They were pumping young guys all throughout their lineup.
Yeah, but how old were those guys? Were they 20 years old or 21, or were they 23 or 24?
They were, for the most part, 20, 21 years old.
Okay. There's a big difference, though, and that's one thing I agree.
I agree.
Ron Hextall about that, but so
yep.
I hear you. It's not fun to look at Andy Andrioff, but I think early in the year, if they default to one of those guys, it's only because they want a solid process. They don't want to be down in these games. And I don't blame them for a fourth-line guy. It's not like we have to look at Yuri Montana again. That's over. So, yeah. I believe me, I hear you. So, let's move along because, one thing that came out in some of the work by the Sterling work of Dave Isaac, Dan was talking about a couple guys who have some things to prove this year. One of them we mentioned earlier, and Wyatt Wiley. He's old enough to play in the AHL this year. He's 20. but he hasn't earned an ELC yet, and he's using his training camp for that purpose, along with Matt Niskanen, who's trying to prove, yeah, I can handle first pair of minutes. What's your thinking about those two players and kind of looking through the lens of what they're trying to do individually?
Kind of surprised that, given the Phantoms defense, which is relatively weak, that they filled with some vets earlier this summer because everybody's, all the kids are called up now. Surprising that Wiley is not there yet, not signed a contract yet. So going to be interesting to see if he does. At this point, I don't see why not. Granted, they've kind of filled it up in the meantime, but he could still, get in there. No reason not to at this point. But yeah, going to be interesting to see what guys like Niskanen can do. Kind of see what guys like Travis Sanheim can do. Those Niskanen and Sanheim probably going to be the two guys that are going to fill in for Ivan Provorov if this holdout lasts into the start of the season. So it's a lot to prove on the back end. And, guys like Myers, if he can take a much bigger step at the NHL level, he kind of hyped last year and disappointed a little bit with a goal and an assist through 21 games, I believe it was. So a lot to prove here, and especially if Provorov goes down. I have an article about this coming out tomorrow. If Provorov's not signed, what is this defense going to look like, and what are they capable of? So a lot of question marks. But I think that on the high side, things could look pretty good. I don't think they're going to live and die by Ivan Provorov.
Yeah, we'll have to see how that turns out. And Kevin, if you look at the aforementioned rankings by Corey Pronman, he has Wiley as a 25th ranked prospect. And he has a chance. He has a chance to be an NHL player, or maybe has a chance to be a pro is probably more accurate. So, I hope that works out. But, for Matt Niskanen, one of the things that Bill Meltzer talked about, Kevin, was that a lot of his play and some of the horrible numbers he generated analytically were right after he smashed into the boards in the corner in a really ugly-looking hockey play gone wrong, and maybe that skewed what were admittedly really bad numbers for him toward the in the middle of the season, and it took him a while to really recover.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly possible. I've been a fan of his. I wanted him back when he was still playing for Pittsburgh, but I certainly think, and especially coming to a new team, he's going to want to, prove some things. I think he'll probably end up being fine, and he's certainly, he's good at getting that breakout going. He'll help shore up the defensive responsibility. So I think he'll be fine. I mean, my only issue with him was really the fact that for this first year anyway, we're eating $1 million of Gudas's salary. So they're paying $6.5 million for him this year, basically. But I've actually, as far as Wiley goes, I was talking about him like the last month of the CHL season last year, and starting to kind of push, hey, hopefully, maybe he'll get signed and he'll be able to come in because he will be 20 on November 2nd, so he's eligible to play for the Phantoms. And I mean, the Phantoms are not very deep on the blue line right now.
Right.
And he's got some good speed. He's got good offensive instincts, but he's solid two-way. I mean, he put up 47 points in 67 games last year, and he was a plus 33, and put up 5 points in 10 playoff games. So I'd like to see a young guy come into the Phantoms and be able to. Huh?
Are you in a wind tunnel?
Yeah, I was going to say, is the cat playing with the phone or?
No.
Yeah, we're getting.
Sorry.
Yeah. It's that's what it sounds like, kind of like a wind tunnel thing going on. But we'll have our crack engineers working on that. So don't worry, people. Hang in there with the O&B. We have excellent engineers here, and you're talking to the only one right here. But anyway, Dan. Let me just move along. We talked about the coaching staff, and one thing that came up in a discussion, there were a couple of different articles, discussions with Alain Vigneault. He does not like having the same people on his power play and PK units. and at least not right away. I mean, I don't know how much choice he's going to have. So that'll be a very interesting discussion about making choices. Does G get taken off the PK, and does Kevin Hayes now fill that role to a fair amount, or what do you think?
It's been something that should have been addressed for years now. Kind of getting Giroux and even potentially Couturier off the penalty kill. Letting them focus on scoring goals and carrying the offense. It's been an issue that has been prevalent for 3, 4, 5, maybe 5 years now at this point. We've been talking about potentially getting them off and starting to limit their minutes on special teams and let them just focus on the game. Bringing in guys like Kevin Hayes, hopefully he can carry some workload there. Lawton has been great in that role, Raffle as well. So they do have some options to move, and I think that's one of the bright sides that Alain Vigneault is going to bring to the table.
Yeah, you have to figure Niskanen and Braun are absolute musts on the PK. I don't think Provorov is very effective on the power play, so he could be replaced by somebody. And I do think Couturier's got to be on the PK, though. I don't see any way out of that. But, it's another subplot to take a look at as we take a look at everything that's going along. So there's a lot of compelling stories. One thing that's not compelling, and Kevin, you got it, just take a deep breath now. Now, one of the, are you ready for this, people? One of the PTOs, professional tryouts, that the Flyers have offered, I think the only one really, is a winger from the English Hockey League. He's a fine gent, and his name is Chris Stewart, and he's a 31-year-old powered forward, and really hasn't been relevant since 2017 when he was with the Wild. So, Kevin, I think Chuck Fletcher's just doing Chris Stewart a solid on this with this PTO. What say you?
Yeah, he does have Minnesota ties. Am I still in a win thing?
No, you're good. You're good.
Okay. But, yeah, I mean, cheerio, tally-ho, whatever you want to say, cup of tea, no. Sorry. They've got enough bodies. They don't need to be wasting time on him. I was going back and forth. Some guy sent me a thing last night on Twitter. Well, they need somebody, who's physical and, can grind out there. Like, God, no. Sorry, we're beyond that mindset in hockey now. So, no, I have no use for him.
No, I wouldn't worry about it. I just think he'd do a solid. Listen, if worst case scenario happened and he bought the kids that were waiting for a half season and he somehow was on track for like 12, 15 goals and like by some miracle actually made it out of camp, it's okay. But I wouldn't worry about it. I think it's a non-story. And besides, if I had $1 for every time that you hear about any athlete in the, quote, best shape of their life, man, I'd be a millionaire. I mean, forget about it. I'm in the best shape of my life. It's too late. So,
I mean, he's been bouncing around the league for, a decade now? I believe he was a first-round pick at one point.
Yeah.
He's always been a guy that, has kind of bounced around with, hoping that somebody strikes on him and, gets that potential. But, it just hasn't happened. And he's a Minnesota guy, so it just kind of, he's not born in Minnesota. I believe he's Canadian. But he did play, I guess the most successful season of his career was probably Minnesota, which, given Chuck Fletcher seems to have a favorite spot for Minnesota players there. I'm not sure, but again, I'm not overly concerned at this point. It's not Dave Haxtell and Ron Hextall, so hopefully this new regime has some kind of sense not to add somebody if they're not going to make an impact.
Yeah, and his best years I think were in Colorado. So he was he looked like a budding star, and he got traded to St. Louis, and it just kind of fell apart because I don't think he took care of himself off the ice, and this happens a lot. I mean, he was in Colorado, and he had a 28-goal season, 64 points in 2010. And then he kind of fell down a little bit and got traded kind of mid-season to St. Louis. I think I was in the Shattenkirk deal. And he ended up with 53 points and 28 goals. So he was still productive. And then he went and had a 30-point season in St. Louis, then a 36-point season, and he started drifting. Then he went to Buffalo and then Minnesota. And like I said, in 17, he had 21 points in a limited role. He played 79 games, and, I think he had 94 penalty minutes, 13 goals, and that he became that kind of guy. Because when these power forwards hit the wall, it's not pretty. So, yeah, I wouldn't worry about him being a real factor for the Flyers. And, there was a point in training camp many training camps where these certain guys show up. And who was the shortest tenured Flyer ever? Who was that guy from Detroit? And he decided to go back. Dan. Yeah, he was with us the whole time, and then at last minute he wanted to go to Detroit, and we were like breathing a sigh of relief. I forget his name.
Now you're going to make me look it up, aren't we?
Yeah, I am.
Let's see what I can
while
find
you're
here.
looking that up, because we always like getting information for you. So the Flyers need a Finnish area scout. And Kevin, Dan Silver was making a point about how the Flyers haven't really drafted that many Finnish players since Joni Pitkanen, but I wouldn't, I think I have a new regime here, and I think the Flyers have drafted really well. So if there's a hole in their scouting game, I'm sure they'll fill that position up soon enough when they find the right guy.
Yeah, I mean, certainly the last few years, you've seen a lot of Finns go, in the first round and some pretty high in the first round. So it certainly, I mean, it wouldn't be a bad thing if they had a little bit more focus over there. I don't know that it's a glaring omission at this point, but, it used to be basically they were kind of known for goalies, and that was about it. But that's changed, in the last several years, and, see what happens.
Yeah. Well, if it weren't for Olli Jokinen, we might not have made the playoffs in 2010. So, he missed that penalty, that shootout, penalty shot.
Yeah.
So.
True.
Was it Dan Cleary?
Yeah, it was Dan Cleary.
All right. There we go.
Yeah.
Whew, I can sleep well tonight.
Yeah, I can sleep well tonight, and reminds me of Megan Cleary. And she was that was Rachel Ward's character in The Thornbirds. Aren't you glad that I made that connection?
There we go.
Yeah.
We all learned something tonight.
Yeah. Well, I was in love for 10 days when that was on. But she was one of the most drop-dead gorgeous women I've ever seen in my life. If you remember Against All Odds and Sharky's Machine.
Yes.
She played Domino.
I just rewatched Sharky's Machine about 2 weeks ago.
She will get in your mind. But anyway, yes, old guys like us, these things happen. But moving right along. So, yeah, the one guy with Finland that I think we probably blew it is we draft Jay O'Brien when I believe Rasmus Kupari was still available. But I might be wrong. But that's the guy I wanted. I certainly was more than fine with Joel Farabee, but yeah, I think Rasmus Kupari is going to be a good player. I think he was drafted by LA, I believe. That was an opportunity to draft a Finn that might burn us. We'll see how that works out. Dan, what do you think of Claude Giroux being ranked 32nd in the power rankings of players by NHL.com?
I don't put too much weight into these things. They're just stupid. I don't know who makes them, but, it's a shame that they're probably getting paid more than I am to do this crap. But, 32 means that he would not be a star on any of the teams in the league at the moment, given there's 31 teams. So I don't know what to make of that. Yeah, I haven't. I don't put too much weight in these lists. I don't particularly care for them, but I guess it's not. Guess it's not the worst, given the way these NHL lists usually go. I'm surprised he's not in the 60s. So I guess it is what it is.
Yeah. Look, if he were still playing center, I think that it would call it more into question. But whenever you're a winger, even if you're getting a lot of PK time, taking a lot of face-offs, it's going to knock you down a little bit. And I agree with you. The whole summer, the whole off season, Kevin, it's one. You only have articles they call listicles, which are articles based around a list, and it's okay. But after a while, you're just inundated with this stuff, and people get kind of a little crazed about it.
Well, it's like when they did the top 20 centers, and it didn't even include Couturier on there.
Yeah.
But it's funny, I actually posted this morning about that very thing, about him being, ranked there, and they listed, well, not the same people, but I had a list here. G was second overall since 2010 in assists in the league, fourth in points, second in power play assists, and second in power play points. And of course, last year he had 85 points, and the year before he had 102 points. But he's whatever it was, 34th or something.
32nd,
32nd in the top 50. That's it's crazy.
Yeah, he just has to go out there on the ice, and there's always a bias against players that don't play for winning teams or play for mediocre teams. It actually would seem to hide you even more. So nobody even knows when you're there. Sometimes if you're like Buffalo and you're awful, like, well, what's going on in Buffalo? And like you see Jack Eichel and Rasmus Dahlin, and that's about it. I mean, there's other players there like Reinhardt and
point proven.
It's about it. I think they did. Well, they did. Didn't they trade for Montour? So he's a good player. Yeah, they made that trade for Brendan Gooley to Anaheim, and they got Montour as a right side defenseman. He was struggling out in Anaheim, but
the Sabres only have 4 players signed going into next season. Oh my god.
Yeah, I don't.
Eichel, Skinner, Okposo, and Johansson. Everybody else is a free agent.
Yeah, it's crazy.
What the hell?
Okay, so we're going to cover 2 more things tonight. Dan, you wrote an article about your favorite player, Samuel Morin, and I saw some other article. I think Sam Carchidi had something, and he's just hungry to get a chance. We talked about the mix of the defense, and you talked about putting out an article like, hey, what's going to happen if Provorov is not signed? I think he might miss a little time, but I'm not too worried about that. But just talk about Sam Morin and what you think he deserves in terms of a chance.
Oh, I can talk about Samuel Morin for, hours on end here, because he is the greatest defenseman of all time, after all.
Yeah, but don't do that. Just, yeah.
Oh, damn. Well, it's going to be interesting. Obviously with the additions of Braun and Niskanen, it makes his position on the team kind of shady at the moment as far as where he's going to end up. But I think he looked great in the 5 games that he played at the end of last season. He looked solid. I think he just needs a chance. He needs an opportunity. And at this point, I think we can say that Robert Haig has reached his full potential as just kind of another fella out there. So I don't think it's impossible that Morin could pass him. But, again, with the Braun and Niskanen guys brought in, and, depending on if Ivan Provorov signs, that's a lot of bodies back there. I believe they have 8 right now. So I don't know where he ends up. I don't think they're going to send him down, because he would need to go through waivers, and guaranteed somebody would take a chance on him. I don't know. I have no idea. I would love to see him get a legitimate chance and, finally prove himself after all these years. But I don't know what is going to unfold with the defense, and I think a lot of it hinges on, if Ivan Provorov is signed before the season starts.
Yeah. It's the thing. Is Haig really peaked out at 24? That's hard to say. He does seem like a guy who banks the puck off the glass and boards, and that's his go-to. I've seen him make some really nice outlets, Kevin, but that's really the battle. One of those guys is likely to be the 7th defenseman, unless the Flyers say, ixnay on that, we're trading both of them. I don't know. I think one of them will be.
Yeah, I mean, I said earlier this summer, I think when I had Jamie on my show, that my expectation was that if Moran gets into camp, he's healthy, he looks decent, he makes it through camp without getting injured, that they could potentially look at trading Haig. He probably had about as good of a season as he will probably have last year. So his trade value should be decent. And, I think Moran, I think he could be a real monster on the back end with his size and his wingspan. Play really well on the PK. Maybe give him a chance. Get a decent pick or a prospect. For Haig, and go with 7 defensemen.
Yeah, it's just a matter of how much experience. That's the one thing that Moran has going against him. He's only played 8 games NHL. And then you have him alongside somebody like Myers. That's under 30 games between them. That's the thing. That is the hang-up. And that's why I think it is possible the Flyers could opt for choice C in that scenario, because, they got to push this thing forward. They got to make some hay and make the playoffs this year. And, Robert Haig statistically is just very unimpressive, even though he gets a lot of zone starts in a defensive zone. But his numbers really in the toilet with regard to expected goals for and against. That ratio is poor. So I don't know. He's very physical, and that's good. But again, if you're banking the puck off the boards and glass and just giving the puck away, as he is wont to do, maybe he has peaked out. And we'll have to see what happens. But, gents, I'm getting word from Anthony DeMarco from thefourthperiod.com, and a usual contributor to the O&B Puckcast. He will not be able to make it tonight. There are some rumors from the TFP rumor mill that we want to just discuss. And I'm sure that I'll do my best to be a TFP, thefourthperiod.com reporter. And we have to take a look we talked earlier about Falk to Anaheim. That deal, according to Dave Pagnotta, is essentially done. They're just waiting for the extension. If they can come to an agreement, it looks like Justin Falk will waive his no-trade clause to Anaheim, and that deal would go through. Now, according to another source, not TFP, I heard that Cachet might have been one of the pieces. It was speculated earlier it could be Max Jones or Sam Steele. Not Sam Steele, maybe Max Jones. But we'll have to see what happens with that. Also, Patrick Laine. Dan, you wrote an article about why the Flyers should consider Patrick Laine if he was available. Kevin, you talked about earlier that there could be a deal between Carolina. There's a lot going on with this. I think there's something at work here. And Dan, I'm going to start with you. I was listening to Peter Tessier from Hockey Buzz. He's based in Winnipeg. He is a very level-headed guy. I really respect his opinion. We got to get him on one time. And he thinks that what's going on with Laine, whose analytics from any measure were in the absolute sewer, the toilet. He had 60% offensive zone starts, but expected goals against was so negative. His plus-minus negative. His relative Corsi compared to his teammates, what shots for and against for, they were negative. It wasn't good. It's deployment. Are people like Blake Wheeler, who's part of the leadership group, and the coach, Paul Maurice, going to dictate how this guy plays, which would stifle his effectiveness? Or are they going to make adjustments to allow this guy to be the 50-goal scorer that he potentially could be? Dan.
It's going to be an interesting call. I could see it either way. I'm not an analytics guy myself. I don't believe in a lot of that stuff. But, I think with a player like Laine, it reminds me a lot of kind of early career Alex Ovechkin, when everybody, he would score 50 goals a season, but everybody would rag on him because his plus minus was terrible and he wasn't playing an all over game. I think guys that are just pure goal scorers. I mean, Laine had a down year last year, quote unquote, and he still scored 30 goals. I think deploying guys like that, who in theory should be an all-around good player, I don't think is necessary. If you're going to score goals, set him up to score some goals. Bringing him again to Philadelphia, I wrote the article today about would the trade make sense, and I'm all for it. I think what the Flyers need, if there was a Flyers wish list right now, the two things on the list would be a legitimate backup goaltender and somebody that can finish, the plays and score some goals. And I think they're going to rely on Van Riemsdyk for that role this year. And they may get, probably 30 goals again, but, I don't know if he's going to be much above that. He's not getting any younger. I think they're going to need some help at some point, and bringing in somebody like Laine, granted, the cap is going to be a little tricky. The trade will be a little tricky. Both teams essentially have just enough cap to sign their own restricted free agents, the Flyers with Provo and Konechny, and the Jets with Kyle Connor and Patrick Laine. So things would need to move around there, but the Flyers have the pieces. Winnipeg would, probably want some players now, given they lost Trouba and Hayes already, and they would be losing Laine. So they would want some players. The Flyers would have it, both forwards and defense, to make up for it. So it would not be an impossible trade. It's just a matter of if the Flyers would go for something like that.
Yeah, here's my problem.
Cough, DeBrincat.
Yeah, well, DeBrincat is a lost opportunity, but Phil Myers is a found opportunity. But I don't know. The thing is, Kevin, the problem is, when you look at analytics, you can say that's so detached and that doesn't mean anything. But here's what really hits home. Those analytics, to me, reflect the reality of watching Patrick Laine play last year. He looked like he was, if he wasn't scoring goals, he did almost nothing else. And so, in other words, the eye test matched these rotten analytics, and let me tell you, they were like toilet worthy. That's the problem. Is that who this guy is? In other words, did the league figure him out and kind of take certain things away, and now he's a 30-goal guy, and he's kind of like JVR, more or less a power play specialist, 5-on-5, a little bit of a cipher, if not more, and just that's the projection you have to make before you bring a guy like that in. Yeah, he's more of a pure shooter, kind of like we talk about Caulfield, in this past draft, a guy who can just, hit a needle in a haystack if you set the target up. But he can't be an absolute zero in every other part of the game.
Yeah, it seems like the Flyers are just somehow morally opposed to drafting pure goal scorers, but what's even scarier is, I don't know, I can't remember the exact number, but something like 2/3 of his 30 goals came in 19 games in the first half of the season.
Yeah. So
I mean, that just makes the analytics look even worse.
Yes. That's a problem.
That is a problem. And yeah, there could be some issues with how they were using him, etc. But he really had a down year after playing really well, putting up 44 goals the season before. He looked strong in the playoffs that season. They went to the conference finals or the semifinals against Vegas. I can't remember now, but yeah, I mean, he just he had several games where he put up he put up 5 goals against St. Louis in one game, so yeah, he had a lot of games where he didn't do anything, and as far as goal scoring, and didn't do anything else either.
Yeah, and that's the issue. But the thing is, on the other side of the argument, Dan, this guy's no doubt a premier, pure goal scoring talent in a league that does not have a lot of them. So this is a tough call. He's only 20. He's 6'5". He's rangy, and it's a tough call as to whether you're going to pay a king's ransom. And I think you had looked at a deal with the JVR and Gostisbehere going out there, and I want Adam Lattery's just a guy he's just a guy. I try to get Roslovic and make a bigger deal out of it, but I don't want to get too deep in the weeds with the deal. Definitely go to BurtherlyPuck.com, read the article, and see what you think. But the Flyers drafted Bobby Brink, who might be a poor man's Cole Caulfield, and they got a defenseman that they're going to need because we mentioned earlier about how many guys they have to pay. If Gostisbehere is expendable because they're going to have Cam York, that's not the worst situation. I'm sure these GMs got their big board out and trying to plan who could go and who could stay and what the contingencies are. That's why they get paid the big bucks. So, any last comments on Patrick Laine and the viability of him, if not here, somewhere else?
I just hope it's not a Metro team if it's not the Flyers.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, you could see the Islanders like Lou striking out on Panarin and like saying, bleep this, let me go get him. And he ends up, torturing us for a decade like Mike Bossy did with the Islanders. Not a bad comparison. You put Laine in a structured situation with a coach who's got a little bit more finesse in terms of influencing shoot first players like Ovechkin to play the right way and kind of round out their game. A guy like Trotz. See, that's to me like a match made in heaven. And maybe AV's that guy too. I don't know. I don't know as much about AV. I believe that on the island, Patrick Laine would probably thrive. You imagine him in Barzil. So,
oh my God.
Yeah. So I guess we're irresolute. We don't really have. I don't have a right answer to this one. So, but there's a cultural issue according to Peter Tessier, and they have to decide going forward who's going to win that battle. Is it going to be compromise? So check out the Hockey Buzzcast dated today, September 9th, if you want a little bit more information, or check out Peter's column coming out soon. And I think we better wrap up there, gents, because the wind tunnel is coming back, and it might be time to check out. Well, listen, it's been... Yeah, really, right, yeah. It's all coming down. But we avoided the hurricane. You avoided the hurricane out in Carolina, so good for you there. But, so we're going to be back before the season opener. I'm not exactly sure when. So we're going to have a really great guest, probably our most popular guest for our season preview show. So that'll be fun. I'll leave you guessing about who that is. But in the interim, we're going to record another quick show because we want to get back to you about some of the observations after watching about 4 or 5 games. And we're going to get somebody who's watched these guys and has some impressions along with the whole crew here at the O&B. So, Dan, you're at Brotherly Puck, National Puck, Brotherly Pod, National Pod. What else can you tell the folks about how to read your stuff and contact you?
You can find me at Dan the Flyer Fan. Find the site at Brotherly Puck, the podcast at Brotherly_pod. A new episode of the Angry Negative Show on Wednesday. BPW Season 2 returns on next Monday, a week from today. And the Brotherly Puck Roundtable preseason will be the 25th and 26th of September. National Puck and National Pod at National Puck and at National Pod.net as well. So check all that out.
Yeah, terrific.
Good Lord.
Yeah, that's a lot. Kevin, you are with PhilliesFlyer.com, and you also have your own podcast, Flyers Face Off, which is going to get cranking up real soon. What else can you tell the folks about your goings on?
Yeah, you can follow me at KS Fortier. I'll be cranking out some articles for Phillies Flyer now that things are heating up again. And my show will be up and running. I'm actually hoping to get a show this Thursday together. You can follow me at Flyers Face Off.
Terrific. And just a reminder again, there is going to be a rookie game this Wednesday. Check out your Twitter timeline and all the beats to see if that will be streamed. And also, the Flyers' first exhibition game is the 16th. I believe that is a Monday. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's a week from today.
Yep.
So wow, that's going to be a real kick. So so we get back to you before that. We are the O&B Puckcast, and we're on all kinds of podcast platforms. If you could rate and subscribe, it really helps, because if you subscribe, we end up higher on the charts for being recommended by your various platforms, particularly iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. We have our own YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, look up O&B Puckcast, all that good stuff. We really appreciate it. So I think we've given you all the info we have until now, and I'm sure that we'll be back next time with Chef and Anthony DeMarco from thefourthperiod.com. And with that, everybody, take care.